Hello everybody, welcome to the Mighty Glue Stick. My name is AJ. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite monsters in Dungeons & Dragons, which is the Mimic. Now I know quite a few of you on the forums are currently making mimics, or you've seen Team Scotty's recent video on making a mimic chest. I'm going to talk about how incredibly versatile and lethal the Mimic actually is, and why it should be your go-to monster for whenever you're stuck with what to throw at a bunch of clever players. Now players have a tendency to, player characters have a tendency to stick things with 10-foot poles, throw coins down corridors, look for traps in every single thing that they come across, because they know they're going to throw traps and things at them. And the best thing to throw at them in those instances is a mimic, because you don't know what a mimic is until you touch it. And checking for traps definitely involves touching, or getting close enough to a mimic for it to attack you. Now, at its essence, a mimic is a creature that disguises itself perfectly as simple objects. They come in a couple of varieties, which is the dumb feral mimic and a reasonably smart mimic with like an intelligence score of 8 to 10. Now all I've got is the playtest version of the Mimic, because I haven't got the monster manual yet, so a few things may have changed, but what I can see here, and I don't think they would have changed a hell of a lot, is that it's a level 4 monster. It's listed as a medium monstrosity shape changer. Now shape changer, I suppose you would have different species of shape changers, but I like the idea of a Mimic going from having a life cycle. And here's where I'll take you on a little journey on my mind of where mimics can go. You can have something like this. And that basically would be a mimic grub. So a little piece of a mimic which is broken off or maybe spored, and it burrows into objects such as apples or fruit, or disguises itself as a coin or a gem. Yeah, something just lying around in the dungeon that would be handy to pick up, and this thing would take a bite out of you. And basically what it would do is mimics work by crushing, so they don't open orifices in themselves, they don't necessarily have a mouth per se, but what they do is they crush and bludgeon a creature to death, and then they soak up the nutrients. So what this thing might possibly do is clamp onto your face or your hand and take off a finger, an ear, a piece of your lip, something like that, and scuttle off with it as quickly as possible. So it would attack and run away as quickly as it could down a crack in the floor, or down a hole or something like that. So it'd be a hit and fade little beastie. But you might possibly have swarms of these things that would attack you, so they would be highly dangerous to high level player characters as well as low level player characters, because these things could swarm you and take off one hit point at a time. The next thing that you have is the medium mimic, and even a small mimic could mimic a medium mimic by inflating itself somewhat, by drawing in air or something like that to bulk itself out to the size of a chest as you'd normally find them, or I like to use them as a door too. So they disguise themselves as an object of interest to player characters. Now mimics you generally find them underground. I'm not sure if that's the norm, but later on for sure they can certainly handle sunlight, so they're not an ooze at all. Now large mimics could disguise themselves as something bigger and bulkier, such as a throne, a fountain. They could easily mimic trickling water coming down out of a fountain and a nice liquid looking pool to drink from. These things are very good at disguising themselves. It's a DC, I think it's 17? Yes, it's a DC 17 intelligence or wisdom check to reveal that the object itself is not what it's supposed to be. You still don't know that it's a mimic just by looking at it. You don't say to your players, you're looking at a mimic. You just say, it doesn't quite look right. Some of the details are a bit wrong, and it's setting off your hackles a bit. Some mimics are intelligent enough to talk to you. So you can have mimics that, the psychology of a mimic is it's just looking for food in any way that it can, and it does this by deception, perfect deception. So does a mimic use its voice to trick and lure? Of course it does. Absolutely. It makes sounds of like crying infants, or a woman in distress, or some sort of an animal that's trapped in something, because it could mimic a slightly twitching body of a fluffy bunny, or a kitten or whatever. It could even mimic a crib, a baby's crib or something like that, and make the noises of a baby inside. Really creepy, really creepy. Now, getting larger, they could go with a pool or a well, a vine that's growing along the side of even a city street or something like that. So somebody reaches for a nice cluster of grapes or something like that which are hanging down off a vine. Very tempting target for children or other such things, and easy pickings for a mimic, which could then quickly unravel itself from the wall that is clinging to and crush the victim to death. Also, a large mimic could easily, if you have an intelligent mimic it's been around for a while, it's been mimicking human beings for a fair bit or hasn't interacted with them, it becomes a doppelganger. And you now have the race of doppelgangers. I mean, where do doppelgangers come from? It could easily be a mimic in your world if you want it to be. Huge mimics and gargantuan mimics and colossal mimics, you're talking, they turn into ruins or a glade, a clearing in a forest, a crypt, a mysterious campsite that seems to have people lying in sleeping bundles. Easy pickings. Now you can have colossal mimics, of course, can appear as towers. You can walk inside the mimic. It could even have a colossal mimic which has other mimics living inside it. So the colossal mimic can be intelligent, and it's got an entire band of its feral children living inside it, which will be incredibly dangerous. And I think the Monsters of Neath the Vale supplement had a tower which was a mimic, and it had these red crows which would appear as a cloud around this thing, and it had been around for so many years that it was a legendary beast. I would imagine that a smart mimic could be tamed by somebody with sufficient skills and resources to feed the thing. Of course, if you feed it too much, it's going to get too big to control, and it will eventually eat you, I'd imagine. They're not that smart, and they are predators. They are predators, definitely. The idea of a mimic that starts stupid and gets smarter as it gets older, I like that, because it's who knows what sort of internal makeup this thing has, whether its intelligence is spread out over all parts of its body, like The Thing from the John Carpenter movies. Does it learn tricks? Does it have particular ways of hunting that it favours? Do mimics have individual personalities? Do they recognise prey that has got away from them and then go hunting after them? Do mimics have a sense of revenge? Do they hunt after those which have killed off their children? Do they target specific settlements? Do they stay away from humanoids as being too dangerous in later life? Do they just become a retired huge mass that only eats livestock? Do they turn into gibbering mouthers, perhaps? If they're exposed to the far realm, do they lose control of their ability to handle their shape changing and become gibbering mouthers, or some other form of noxious shape shifting oozy thing? Do they become less aggressive? Do they become more aggressive? Yeah, so there's all sorts of ways of handling mimics in your game, and I encourage you to think very creatively about it, because they can be any simple object. They can disguise themselves as swords, carts, a resting horse that's not moving, dead animals, rivers beds, or fallen logs across rivers. Could you imagine that? Oh, there's a nice handy log to walk across. It's a mimic. Yeah, so by all means, think carefully about how you're going to use mimics, and spring them on the players every single time they think they've seen everything that a mimic has to offer. Throw them something else. Happy gaming, everyone.